Credit unions have, politically, there's a lot of fences. We need to take those fences down, build a table, build a platform that allows us to collaborate, aggregate value, and do things better.
Hey there, and welcome to Insights from the Inside by Modyo. My name is Wesley Campbell. Today's guest is Chris Goodman. Chris Goodman has over 30 years of experience in IT, with over 20 years of experience working specifically in financial services, and has a very interesting perspective, not only at this crossroads between those two disciplines, but also in the profound work that he does with Canadian credit unions and their systems. So, what Chris does is he talks a lot about the importance of the platformization of financial institutions, not only in Canada, but also across the world. This has global effects and reach, and he claims this will have a tremendous impact, not only now, but into the future. And he's been giving the challenges that these financial institutions are facing, specifically credit unions, a lot of deep thought. He's a believer in seeding ideas and thinking in the right mindset. And he's now waving a flag because he sees change happening in 2021 that is unlike anything he's anticipated before. And what it's really coming down to is he thinks that we're not reacting fast enough. Now, I don't want to speak too much more on his behalf. He has a lot to cover here, and it's a very interesting conversation. Everything from the different topics that we discuss in the past, problems in the present, and looking on into the future. But I think that he will obviously say it better than I possibly ever could. So, without any further ado, I bring you Chris Goodman. And here we are with the next Insights from the Inside episode. And we're so lucky to have the one and only Chris Goodman. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time to meet us today.
Thank you, Wesley. I look forward to having a discussion.
Absolutely. Well, I think what we'll do for this talk is there's a lot of ground we could cover. And I think what we'll structure is something like the past, the present, and the future. And I think there's no better way to start it. So, for the people that there might be some listeners that they know all about Chris Goodman and others might not. So, why don't you give us, to kind of amplify our audience's knowledge a little bit of your background and tell us about the financial services industry, your involvement there. And that can be a good stepping off point before we get into all these details that I know we're going to cover today.
Absolutely, Wesley. My name is Chris Goodman. I was formerly CIO at G&F Financial Group in Vancouver, BC, fairly large British Columbia and Canadian credit union. I left that position at the end of February to really work full time on the credit union platformization piece. I've been working on digital transformation for my entire career, and I came to the conclusion that really no one institution in the credit union system is going to solve this problem on their own. It needs to be done collectively, it needs to be done collaboratively, and it needs to be done at scale so that we can compete with the forces that are emerging. The big banks are investing a lot in technology. We have digital newcomers. And for me personally, community finance is close to my heart, and I see it as being important for credit unions to make the right moves to ensure that we're perpetuating the credit union value proposition as we move forward.
Nice. Yeah, you mentioned a little bit, and we'll get into the details about maybe those problems that are emergent, and then your particular angle or perspective from the established banks, and maybe talking about disruptors and fintech, and then we'll focus a lot about your perspective from credit unions, the kind of community financing that you mentioned there. I'd like to go into a little more opportunity, though, if you will, just in terms of your background. And what would you say is maybe one of your bigger successes that you've had looking back on your years, like you've said, in digital transformation and kind of your specialty there? What have you seen it's really been impressive?
Yeah, well, I guess my entire career is based on cooperation and collaboration. So really nurturing, credit unions working together within the ecosystem. Credit unions don't have the economy of scale that they need on their own. They need effective economy of scale. And the only way that effective economy of scale is going to materialize is by working together within various constructs. It could be together as credit unions directly. It could be under an umbrella of some sort, for example, a vendor. But at the end of the day, we need to work together to bring the same scale to the problems that we face. So I would classify that as my biggest success, really sort of nurturing collaboration across the system, building partnerships and relationships and getting things done that wouldn't have otherwise got done if we weren't working together.
Nice. So yeah, talking about nurturing collaboration in response to that need for scalability. And maybe we can talk about that need to scaler, why that's a need, or if that need is unique later on. So what do you think that you could say is in the kind of face of, say, a problem like scaling? Could you disclose anything? They say you either win or you learn. Have you ever had any important learning experiences in the past that you'd like to share with us?
Well, for me, it's also on the collaboration piece. Like
Okay.
I spent over a decade working on, trying to get us together as a system to move things forward, and we didn't get to where we needed to be. So it's not necessarily a failure, but I think credit unions need to do more. We're sitting here
Hmm.
in 2021. We're staring at the water. We see that the ocean's receded. We see the tidal wave coming at us, and really, it's now or never. The hour is getting late. If we do not work together as a system to do what we need to do at scale digitally, we're going to be in trouble. And that's going to affect the most important person or people in the conversation, credit union members across Canada who value cooperative finance and who benefit from cooperative finance.
If you were to almost take that soundbite out and talk about kind of seeing what's coming and using the metaphor of the tidal wave, without speaking maybe directly to people who value, say, community banking, this concept of there's something on the horizon, it's important, we need to prepare for. I feel that that's such a sentiment you hear all the time, everywhere now these days. I mean, with 2021, people are feeling everything with the pandemic and the impetus for change. People really need to really adapt. And so that's interesting that even when we look at it from finance, from credit union perspective in Canada, even there where it's echoing that same sentiment, it's echoing that same need to kind of push through. That's very fascinating.
Absolutely. Like what we're looking at right now is basically the platformization of everything. We see
Hmm.
platforms in meal delivery. We see platforms in media. We see the platformatization of retail. It's happening all around us, and finance is not excluded. Here in Canada, a prominent meal delivery uh, service company their executive deliberately got into financial services because it's a market ripe for disruption. Um,
Oh wow.
yeah. So in that model, however, what's happening is the people that are mediating services are unknown. So you're participating in the lion's den anonymously with a commodity product. And that's not a place where credit unions and tier two financial institutions want to be. We need to be taking advantage and participating in the platform economy as opposed to succumbing to it, so to speak.
Yeah. In it just occurs to me in thinking about the way that you've got a CIO transitioning over to food industry because you're saying it's ripe for disruption. That's one take. I've also heard a take about the way these disruptors are working. There's this heavy network effect, right? The more the people use something, the more popular that thing becomes, and it gives rise to, say, a monopoly, right? So you think of Uber Eats, you think of things like that. But when you talk about credit unions, this is a good transition here because you've talked about the kind of DNA of credit unions coming from this concept of cooperation. So we're talking about a network effect, but then also this concept of independence that kind of echoes the way that Canadians in the past recognized the importance of self-reliance. So if we think about that, the power of that network effect, how is it that you could harness something like that in a credit union, given that they are kind of independent, and it is important to be collective because there's some parallel there with the way a lot of these disruptors are working today.
Absolutely. And that's the dichotomy that we need to address. The thing about network effect is, by definition, the more individuals or organizations that are involved in a network effect, the better it is for everybody. And,
Right.
credit unions at their roots, if you go back 100 years ago, were founded by very, tough, independent people, farmers, people in the fishing industry, people in the forestry industry, working class people who were finding that banks weren't meeting their needs. So, credit unions sprung from that, and they've grown from that, and they've prospered from that. But now we're in a situation where economies aren't as local; we're global.
Mhm.
Technology is global. Um, so, in order to take things to the next step and to build a network effect that the others are doing, we need to work together. So, in
Mhm.
fact, what we're doing is maintain our independence by expanding our periphery and cooperating on a larger scale than we have previously.
Right. Perfect. Yeah, that's also interesting in terms of that concept of going from global to local. In fact, I might take the opportunity to ask you. I've seen in your writing you use this term "glocal." I've never heard this until I read that a few times. Could you, in the context of I've see it pop up. It's peppered throughout some of your writing. What do you mean by glocal? Are we just combining global and local, or is there an idea behind that? Did you invent this? I've never heard of it before.
No, no, it's a term that's gaining or circulating a little bit more commonly now. But what
Hmm.
globalization means is for maintaining a local advantage by leveraging what is global. So
Okay.
we have technology that's global. We have benefits that we can gain by looking outside of our marketplace, and ultimately scale. That's what's required. We need an economy of scale as a system, and these days scale is international. It's no longer local, regional, or even national for that matter.
Yeah, all the thinking. I think you could almost look in the direction of any industry, and everything is going international.
Exactly.
Uh, and actually, to kind of go back to the past a little bit, I know that we're talking about 100 years ago with these farmers. It's interesting to tell this narrative or the story, this historical fact that their needs weren't being met by the traditional banks at the time. So they went off, and these hardy people, and they built a credit union system. It's interesting to today where there's that the migration of, say, a consumer, if their needs aren't being met from one financial service to another, it's not quite as as committed, I guess you could say, where you don't have to really put in so much time, effort, and energy. But it really is. That's where the experience changes, where we are going from a situation that someone goes somewhere, in this case, in the past, to a bank or that's to invent a credit union, versus, well, I'll just install a new app, or I'll just do it from my back pocket. And that's that going into what I'd like to talk to you later about, that star to support role. So this is very interesting to think about how difficult, like what were those needs that the bank wasn't meeting, that the credit union, so much so that it's not just as easy as reinstalling an app, that everyone, they really invented a whole new way of doing business. What was going on there, to give us a little bit more context?
Exactly. Well, back in those times, banks weren't lending. They weren't lending to people that needed money. So people grouped together and they did that collectively amongst themselves. Um,
Hmm.
that was the fundamental starting point. And if you go internationally, personally, I've been to Malawi and to Uganda and to Kenya. You see credit unions still functioning the way they were functioning here a long time ago. When you see a credit union who, for example, gives a single mother a loan and she's able to grow a crop for a year and support her family, that's a very powerful thing to see in person. That's what credit unions used to do. Today, the value proposition has changed a little bit, and we're more now looking after a member's well-being. That's our responsibility. So when you look at technology, it's about looking after a member's well-being in the best possible manner.
That's really wonderful. I really enjoy. I actually love, in fact, that you're able to so easily point out the human connection to technology. It's really the essence of digital transformation, right? It's ultimately, we obsess over the technology part of it, but it has to do with human needs, like solving problems, and in this case, ingenuity, and how we can leverage technology to solve those problems. In fact, I believe before the talk, we had some correspondence back and forth, and we mentioned you had shared a video from something like 40 years ago, and it was a track meet, I believe, in BC, in British Columbia, and it was these young boys, high schoolers, that were using computers. I mean, this must have been in the 80s, and they were using these computers to track what was going on during this sports event, and it was being heralded as, look at us, like we've got our own Silicon Valley boys here in Canada. And it's funny to think about the technology that they're using is trivial compared to what's in your back pocket right now. What we're recording over a network. I think this recording is getting saved in the cloud as we speak, which is amazing compared to the tech before. And yet it's not like these problems that we face with digital transformation, they're the problems are just self-emergently solved through more tech. I mean, we have more tech than ever, and there's still plenty of challenges, global as they may be. So I would ask, I guess, what's the vision that people had when they were solving digital transformation 40 years ago, when those boys were, say, recording data for a track meet, versus what we're doing now to to globalize the concept of credit unions in Canada? What is the vision the same as it was 40 years ago? Is it different now, or how do we match up?
From my perspective, technology is just a tool. In the 80s, we were using technology as a tool. Today, we use technology as a tool. It excels in some areas in adding value. You have to remember that a rock, a stick, and some moss is a tool as well. You can start a fire with that. But how many people do you know who can put a fire with a stick and a rock? Not many. But it's how you use the technology. A track meet would run today on an iPhone as well. I think the difference between now and 40 years ago is connectivity. In the 80s, if
Mhm.
you wanted to connect a computer to another computer, you may have joined a local area network. You may have connected to another computer using a modem. Today, connectivity is everywhere, and that's really the job, and that's how we're aggregating value by taking advantage of that connectivity and delivering experiences to members that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Right. Yeah, connectivity I think is part of that core solution that you see for credit unions going forward into the future, is that they have that independence, but they need to be networked. They need that connectivity. I think that's an important point. I guess we could actually tie those two together and talk about this concept today then of this core identity in relation to technology. Like what is today's technology reality for Canadian credit unions, as in terms of how they sit? Are they ahead of the game, or are they behind? Are they somewhere in the middle?
I guess today, when you look at what's required with platformization, what credit unions need is a platform which is actually a series of interconnected underlying platforms or pillars.
Hmm.
And if you look across the industry, there's a lot of legacy technology out there. Many credit unions signed their banking system contracts 15, 20, 25 years ago. They're legacy systems. Banking has changed. We're now looking at headless banking. Um, we're looking at, our job now is to be where our members and customers are in their journey. Members are no
Hmm.
longer driving to the branch for some hot coffee, to log on to a legacy banking system. They want you in their back pocket, wherever they are, to support them in the journeys that matter to them.
Yeah, perfect. And in fact, I think in your writing, maybe to take it in this direction, say, I've seen you say that you seem to think that Canadians' credit unions are at a bit of a crossroads for digital transformation. And I've noticed that you're careful to caution that they collectively measure the value of digital, say, versus analog. So we're talking about this analog experience of doing something versus doing something digital, and what that process of going digital really means for credit union members. And I love you've used a few different metaphor. I think I've commented to you even before this talk that I love your metaphor. They are very insightful for me. But this concept of, okay, here's where we are with technology as credit unions, and here's how we go digital, or what that even means. And you've cautioned about this concept of going digital versus going analog in terms of the whole perspective for digital transformation. Could you expand on that?
Absolutely. Credit unions fundamentally differentiate on the basis of relationship.
Hmm.
For credit unions to be successful moving forward, it's about parlaying that relationship advantage into digital. So going digital doesn't mean you're losing the relationship and providing automated services to people. What it does mean is you're using technology to mediate relationship and to look after members and customers' financial well-being, using other channels in addition to branch. Branch
Hmm.
is still, obviously a channel, but we also need to use digital to look after relationships as well.
That's interesting. So, given the fact that this concept of community and collaboration is such a pillar in credit unions, that's all built on human relationships, right? And we're seeing a lot of human relationships. I don't know of a word better than disrupted, right? With given the pandemic, in so many ways, there's so many advantages. We're able to connect from great distances, and that's tremendous. But it is a bit different to meet someone in person, right? To have that personal touch. And I think that people joke these days, say, oh, remember when we used to walk into our neighbor's house and hug them, and we're now in a different place. And so talking about what you can go digital and what you don't, it seems that that's being such a pillar for community banking, or credit unions. Is there something being lost that we just can't ever get back, or will we have to accept the difference? I mean, what are we really looking at here?
I think we're looking at a blend. We have numerous different channels, and we need to blend those channels to sort of provide an optimal experience.
Hmm.
People that know me know that I often indicate that the digital anthropologist is the smartest person in the room right now. We see the world changing around us. What we need to be doing is looking at the credit union value proposition from an anthropological point of view. What is that going to look like in 3 years? And then set our trajectory in terms of technology to meet that requirement. Relationship is important. Obviously, we all have in-person relationships and we text back and forth as well. So it's a blending of channels to meet everybody halfway.
Right, absolutely. This concept of value that you talk about, I think we wanted to definitely touch on this. So I remember reading an article that you have written this year, I believe back in April, about the value of value aggregation. And you mentioned that frictionless finance is removing this industry, and we'll touch back on this topic now, from being the key upfront party in a member journey to moving to this strong supporting role. And my question there is, if we're again talking about no more face-to-face experiences, we're going digital on things, is this move a risk for credit unions that can't adapt, because this is going to be the new normal? Like, what are some other key risks that credit unions are facing today? And I've seen you touch about on a few things here, just to kind of throw some ideas out there. You've seen you talk about sunk costs, the difficulty of change, the viable options not being perceived or not being thought to exist. So where are we at in terms of the value of value aggregation there?
Well, that's why I'm an advocate of a platform and doing this collectively, because we do have options if we consider what we can do collectively. Uh,
Hmm.
Value aggregation is in essence doing more than we could otherwise by drawing more parties and services into a particular value proposition. It's about understanding our members, understanding where they are, and being there for them. If a member is standing in Costco and wants to buy a Nintendo Switch and doesn't have $500 in their account until tomorrow, that should be a one button, 1 second, buy now, pay later, walk out the door situation. It's simple, but today we can't accommodate that sort of thing. If a member is in a coffee shop, maybe we should be buying that coffee for them because they're a highly valued member. And maybe we should be advising them that they're 90% into their coffee budget, because asking, just suggesting that they downsize their order. We need to be looking after their well-being, and that's what the credit union value proposition means to me moving forward, and that's what value aggregation is. It's being a credit union, but being maintaining that thoughtfulness and participating in financial well-being.
That's so interesting that you it's great. I can see the kind of ideas percolating there, to actually to talk about coffee, to see ideas percolating there where you can pick out a moment in someone's life, if you, and this is all based on good design and good use of technology, as you've said, where you can take a moment, say, to reflect on a coffee budget or just a budget in general for someone in a given moment. And if that has value to them, people will naturally move towards experiences that are like that. I mean, it would be, how nice would it be if you had a friend or someone that you believe has your best interest in mind financially, to say, hey, by the way, you can get a discount here, or you tend to buy this thing, this or this other off brand is just as good. And that's all about how you can aggregate data, interpret, understand the experience that someone is looking for. That's interesting. Have you done any work in this type of experiential technology? Because that's a very fascinating topic.
Well, a lot of thought, but
Hmm.
the credit union and how we can participate in that experience.
Yeah,
Because when you look at various fintech options out there, they may not necessarily have your best interest at heart. For
that's true.
example, if you're out looking at a recreational vehicle, sure you may be able to get a loan from a fintech in 3 minutes to get that done for you, but is it necessarily the best decision for you to be making as a credit union member? Perhaps not, and that's where credit unions can add value to sort of steer people towards their goals and be an active participant in the process.
That is actually probably something very uniquely fascinating for credit unions, because of this concept of community. It strikes me when you talk about a fintech maybe not having someone's best interest in mind. It depends on the situation, because you want to distinguish yourself as a company that really is being considerate of someone's experience, and being able to take the data and build a solution that offers them. The two that come to mind, one is kind of funny and one is a little bit dark, is with Amazon. Yeah, I think I've seen someone on Twitter. She bought a toilet seat on Amazon, and she says, I don't know how many toilets Amazon thinks I have or need, but I bought one, and now all they do is offer me toilet seats, which is, it's, again, they're not understanding what's the experience of the average person buying something, right? Why would they need so many of the same product? And then the other more dark one is, I believe it was Zuckerberg on Facebook. He said something to the effect of, what's good for the world might not necessarily be good for Facebook, right? Well, if you take that concept and expand it down, you wouldn't have a credit union very long lived if it said, what's good for our credit union might not necessarily be good for our community members, right? You would never hear that. Yeah, I guess maybe in that way, do you think that people might kind of return to credit unions, or this concept because they can trust them?
I think that's the advantage of credit unions because theoretically, with a platform, you have complete insight into what's going on and can make the best recommendations for people. A fintech
Hmm.
can be one part of a journey. A credit union could potentially be part of the entire journey, supporting members along the way.
Hmm.
With the data piece, it's experimental even with big tech. I can give you another Amazon example.
Okay.
A couple months ago, I was offered a rock tumbler on Amazon. My digital footprint doesn't involve rock tumblers. I've never searched for one online. Um, but I do, living here in British Columbia, Canada. I do collect rocks when I'm out in the backcountry. It's just part of what I do. So somehow they knew by aggregating information that offer would have value to me, and it did when they presented it. So amazing things are happening as well. And
Hmm.
for credit union, we can be part of that to ensure that the credit union value proposition is incorporated into the manner in which we use data. We want to use it in our members' best interests.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Using it in members' best interest, and it is incredible. To give all credit where credit's due, it's incredible how larger companies like Amazon are able to offer something in a way that you didn't even realize that you wanted, and now you can. And so, in that way, that you can offer people tremendous experiences because you're giving them the things that they want based on their life. So that's absolutely true. That's really wonderful. Yeah.
Absolutely, and in a trusted manner, because data aggregation is really wild west right now. People are willing to give up personal information for minor conveniences. Consumer DNA is probably the best example. It costs way more than $79 to do a DNA test, but they're charging
Hmm.
that for a reason because they're getting basically everything about you in that one test.
Yes, yeah, I've heard about some of these companies. That I haven't taken the dive yet. I haven't actually gone, but it's very fascinating to me. I think it's fascinating to anyone to. It's interesting. It's a service that seems to kind of illuminate people's history, illuminate the past, and that's quite fascinating. Yeah. So I guess we're talking a little bit about some of these other problems that I know that credit unions are facing, or when we're talking about the value of value aggregation and in fintech and more credit unions. You've mentioned this concept of sunk costs when we think about, especially with like legacy technology and what have you. Is this very prevalent? You see in credit unions this kind of sunk cost fallacy.
Absolutely, and it makes me. I think back to the first day of economics and the first day of college or university. The professor always says, "Don't make decisions based on sunk cost in economics." And
Hmm.
enter into the real world, and chasing sunk costs seems to be an athletic event sometimes. Um, it, and I get it. Switching is hard, but we're sort of at a point in our juncture where, okay, sure, there may be sunk costs, but we also need to navigate the ship to ensure that we're doing the right thing and adopting to our digital futures in the most effective manner.
Yeah, a huge part of the work in adapting to the change is really convincing the minds involved that this change is necessary, it's possible, and it will improve things in XYZ way. It seems that many times people don't want to be the one that rocks the boat unless they can really have the vision to know that rocking the boat is actually going to help course correct for a better direction. Yeah.
And that's the situation we're in 2021. Uh,
Hmm.
if we, looking out, if our industry does not change, things will be changed for us. So now I believe we're at a juncture we can choose between a bigger piece of the pie or a smaller piece of the pie. By continuing on our current path, it'll be a smaller piece of the pie by default. By making the right decisions and working together, there's a real opportunity in front of us as well. And that's why I'm focusing on the platformization piece. I do see the
Perfect.
opportunity, and I do see the opportunity to maintain the credit union value proposition and in fact make it better by using digital, the tool of digital,
Mhm.
in a smart manner.
Right. Yeah, and then I think that it's the tool of digital built on this concept of trust, really. Being able to leverage that trust through technology and letting people know, hey, I have your best interest in mind. Now go enjoy that extra coffee. You have it in the budget. You've earned it, type deal. So absolutely, that's great. So, I think I hope it's clear to any listener at this point that you're really a thought leader when it comes to this industry in particular. And so, what's the best case that you could make for credit unions in Canada today against the backdrop of financial services sector overall? How could we kind of throw their hat in the ring there? Like, what would that hat look like?
Well, I would say it's really, as we discussed, it's enhancing the manner in which we collaborate. Credit unions have been around for over 100 years. I believe they should be around for another 100 years, and they have a part to play in the future financial services offering for people around the world. So, in my
Mhm.
mind, a best possible situation would be that we do see the tidal wave coming in. We do say, okay, now is the time to stop suntanning and to get moving on solutions that'll move us in the right direction and get us onto a national platform. Credit unions have, politically, there's a lot of fences. We need to take those fences down, build a table, build a platform that allows us to collaborate, aggregate value, and do things better.
When we talk about this platform, we're really talking about, so we've gone from talking a bit about risks and sunk cost and what have you to now we're transitioning into opportunities. So if we're looking at platformatization as an opportunity, you're mentioning things like the facilitating the sharing of data, right, over a platform, say for example. Are there other advantages, like, or are there things or insights you could give to what can result from the sharing of that data, or other opportunities based on platformization?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like the whole point of a platform is to provide an open environment.
Okay.
So the platform participants, but you also have fintechs and other people in our ecosystem who want to be involved in an aggregated offering as well.
Mm,
As a CIO of a credit union, it's you know what the process is for integrating a fintech. It could be $200,000. It takes months to do. Then you end up with a skunkworks project. You move on, you move on to the next fintech, and at the end of the day, you end up with a basket of skunkworks projects. They may be adding value, but you're not. They're discrete items, and you're not aggregating. In a
mm.
platform type of environment, it's more straightforward. You establish a, a method for fintechs to integrate. They have access immediately to a large group of customers, and we can all innovate based on that. So it's this whole open platform piece that's important. Also, what's important is facilitating the new ways things are being done in technology. Headless banking, you may have heard that term, or composable banking.
Oh yes.
Yeah, but with headless banking, you don't have a client anymore. You need to reskin that functionality somewhere, and the platform can do that effectively as well. To take a composable banking platform and reskin that on your own as one credit union is a very difficult task. To do it collectively at scale, it's a much easier proposition to take on.
Okay, so leveraging that collectivism, as you've said, to do this reskinning is something that is possible through collaboration, but otherwise would be daunting. In other words, because it's just not feasible to do so. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then when we talk about these changing member journeys, there's literally hundreds of journeys. And again, for a small sized organization, it's hard to look at all of those journeys, dissect them, and digitize them. But again,
Hmm.
do that collectively. We're doing that at scale, and we're accommodating a an ecosystem for credit unions that really does enhance the member value proposition.
Right. Well, and actually, let's talk about the changing member journeys, because this has kind of come up through the talk a bit. When we're talking about changing member journeys, what are we really talking about here? Because we know that there can be some things that have changed, sure, right? But in the end, when we talk about major life events in which financial institutions can support people, buying a car, going to college, buying a house, maybe having their firstborn, and everything. These are still life events. They were life events 100 years ago. Well, maybe not 100 years ago with the car. A car. Well, Do I have my dates right? Yeah, more or less. But then finance being involved, heavily involved with it, versus now. Let's only go back 40 years. That'll sound better. And but so given the fact that all these experiences, people are still doing all these things. They're still buying cars. They're still going to college. What do we mean by changing member journeys?
Yeah, in my mind, a member journey is no longer getting in their car, coming to your branch, coming
Hmm.
inside, grabbing a coffee, and sitting down to have a 45-minute application taken. That's the way things used to work. Now our job with digital is to be with the member on the journeys that matter and add our value along the way. An origination process shouldn't take 45 minutes. It shouldn't take 3 minutes. Um, there's enough information out there to make these decisions quickly and to support members along the way. The same reason why Starbucks is closing stores in a lot of vicinities because they've realized even this isn't just affecting finance; it's affecting everybody. That
Oh yeah.
members are no longer coming to your retail outlet. Your job is to be along with them for the ride wherever they are.
Right. It's the you find out about the need of your consumer, your client, and you adapt your product, and you build a product around solving that need. You don't create a product and then find where your market is. You really need to do it the other way around, as you're saying.
Yeah, no, and also not just products, but creating opportunities to
Hmm.
build community. Because that's what credit unions do in their local geographies. Pay it forward. Buy a coffee for the next credit union member that comes into a branch. Compassion-based banking. Uh,
That's
we
great. That's honestly really great. Yeah, that's tremendous. You know, so we're it just strikes me that the way just having this conversation, there's so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity to do so much more than what I'm used to now. I mean, I'm sure that in the future, my kids are going to be having experiences or things that they don't even think twice. Say, oh, of course they do this. Of course, if we see like credit unions come to fruition in the way you're speaking of, they'll look at something like when they're my age and say, "Oh, of course they support me in this. Of course, I would not have a relationship with them otherwise." So the question that begs the question now, today, 2021, what is making leaders hesitant to adopt these new innovations? What's the perceived risk? I mean, what makes them not just go for this opportunity right away?
I think to a certain extent, it's understanding that the opportunity is here today. I've been in digital now for 40 years, and things are changing. I can honestly say things are changing in 2021 like no other year I've experienced.
Okay. Wow.
3 years ago, we used to sit around talking about digital transformation and change and that sort of thing. But now the ground is literally shifting underneath our feet. And the reason why I left the credit union system is because I didn't leave my passion for the credit union system. I left working for an individual credit union because there really isn't a viable solution out there when you look across the board. We need to build that. The onus is on us to build that. And we need to do that collectively if we're going to be successful due to the scale of what's required.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, it's great. We're bringing it full circle because it's not about just doing the solution. It's about finding something that scales really in a way that is sustainable. Because again, and then that scalability, how does it rear its head? Well, platformization, you want to create something open, as you've said, because the openness is what creates the scalability so that people can then innovate. You can't come up with all the ideas yourself, but if you create a system that allows collaboration, people are inventive, people are creative, and again, that goes back to the human ingenuity of digital transformation, that it all comes together.
Exactly, and a platform enables that. In our past world, you may have thought of an idea and then pushed it out 18 months later if you're successful in getting it funded. In
Hmm.
today's world, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that in 6 weeks. And
Yeah, nice.
sometimes the people with the best ideas may be your members, they may be your younger employees. Everybody should be involved in the innovation process. We should be doing that in in dialogue with everybody in our ecosystem. And literally, it doesn't take long to build out new solutions and to add functionality. We just need good ideas, and we need a platform that allows us to execute on those good ideas.
Yeah, you're almost getting into work culture organization and having technology reflect that. I'm thinking of Kanban and Kaizen, where they have even the janitors have good ideas on how you can innovate, and that's been around the industry for years, not just in finance. I mean, Toyota, I think the Japanese really came up with that. So
Yeah, and I would say there's a bad habit in technology for technology people to get into a back room, close the door, and then come up with solutions that they think will satisfy everybody. But at the end of the day, technology is just a tool, and we should be technologists need to be listening to everybody. And again, at the end of the day, the most important person in the conversation is the credit union member, and
right,
ensuring that we're meeting their requirements.
right. Yeah, and it's interesting too, where that kind of value aggregation of collective ideas. This is a thing that happens. I mean, for those listening, even with people participating, we talked about the network effect and value add. With people using so many different tools out there, these uh, applications that help you track routes and the best form of traffic to navigate home. The only reason those have value as a platform where you can connect with the data is the data is shared among everyone.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it is. And we're talking about doing that for finance.
Exactly, and convenience and speed as well. Consumers and members are used to 5 out of 5 digital experiences. They're everywhere. In fact, there's really no excuse not to have a 5 out of 5 digital experience. The technology exists today to do that. Uh,
Right.
and that's what we're competing against, and that's why I talk so much about needing to put some cost behind us. Because if we're going to be delivering 5 out of 5 experiences, we need to be doing that within a new construct.
It makes me think of I don't know. There's like a couple wagon rides going on, and then you get in one wagon ride. You say, "Hey, why is it so bumpy? Your wheels are squares." You say it, and well, no, that's just how we have it. Or that's what our technology is. Well, those guys have wheels that are circular. It looks like a much better experience. And then, oh well, we have great services on our square wheeled wagon. Is it no? Like you said, there's no excuse now. There's really the technology's there. Like put circular wheels on.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, members will go to where they're better served. That's the reality.
Hmm.
Credit
Hmm.
unions have been an advantage up until now for them. Our job is to make sure that we continue to be an advantage by innovating in the digital space, like our competition.
This talk is so fascinating to me because it's great that in every way we're really focusing on credit unions, but so much of what you're describing and the sentiment you're echoing is it's true in so many other industries. And it's really true across the board. It's conceptually quite fascinating. I would actually like to get a little bit more specific now. Something that I know is a specific example in Canada. There's this boom of financial innovation, in particular in Canada and cities like Calgary that were previously known for more traditional industries. So again, there's this change happening. So, what market conditions do you see uh, giving rise to this phenomenon, and how do you see it complementing or challenging credit unions? So, we're talking about the way credit unions need to change, but given that we're seeing a place like Calgary that can completely start to shift, how is it that we see that complementary challenging credit union systems now?
Now, we talk about change. What we're actually seeing are changes in the expectations of members and customers. That's what's
Hmm.
driving all of this innovation. Fintech startups, they're out there to meet and solve certain problems for members and customers. So that's what's driving the innovation. It's not companies themselves; it's the changing expectations of members and customers, and that's really where credit unions need to position themselves. Platformization is occurring across all industries, including finance. If you go to a lot of your favorite retailers, you'll probably notice that they have a buy now, pay later process enabled, facilitated by fintech. Like, why are
Hmm.
credit unions and banks in that space as well? By not innovating, we're going to be left behind, and others will be supporting members and customers in their journeys as opposed to us.
Is there something to be said there about the way, because there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of moments in life where people, you can add a lot of value there. But I noticed that a lot of these fintechs or disruptors, they become very focused. Like there could be a fintech that really focuses on microloans. There could be one that focuses on a buy now pay later. There could be one that focuses specifically on adding value during some kind of car insurance process, and they don't do anything else other than that. Is that a challenge to specialize or to kind of be known for certain things? Because traditional banks, they do a lot. Credit unions can do a lot, and then versus these disruptors, they're more specific. No.
Absolutely. Like fintech, most of them do meet specific needs. I use the word FinPlat. We have
Okay.
FinTech. We also need FinPlat. We need a place for fintech to happen, and we also need a place where the value of fintech can be aggregated because it could be three or four different fintechs put together that deliver the best possible experience for a member or customer. And right now, credit unions and banks are in a position to stand up those platforms and mediate those experiences.
Hmm. Perfect. And and I've heard of innovations. I mean, even there's banks that, for instance, they know specifically a very common transaction that happens among their members is they just need to they're out for lunch and they just want to pay each other very quickly, but they don't want to swap the bills and the coins. So build an app on an open platform that says, okay, here, put your money here, and then just start to swap it back and forth, and we'll make it very easy for you to move that to your standard bank account, or leave it there and take it out in an ATM. Use your same card, and it's just a specific app to solve a specific problem, right? And there's no reason why a bank can't develop that, or a credit union.
Yeah, develop it or leverage fintech. Um,
Hmm.
they could be doing it, or we could be using one of the many, many fintechs in our environment. But the point is to have that available. Uh,
Hmm.
Payment, social savings. There's all sorts of different areas where we can be, innovating and doing things that matter to members. Uh, you know,
Right.
it's all, the traditional life processes, applying for a mortgage, that sort of thing. Like we're used to those, but there's also a lot of fun things that could impact members' daily lives a lot more frequently and endear them to your organizations.
Okay, well, I'd like to transition now to talking a little bit about the present day and going into the future because I know that you're laying the groundwork right now with Kyndryl. Like you're working in parallel there. It's a spin-off company from IBM IT Infrastructure Services, and if possible, could you share a little bit about what you're hoping to achieve there with Kyndryl?
Kyndryl is not yet an official entity, but it will be towards the end of the year. And really, in spinning this off, IBM is putting running and managing modern, efficient, and reliable infrastructure and systems into Kyndryl's shop. And we see that as highly compatible to what's happening here in Canada with Platform. Platform is all about running utility services at scale, and that's what Kyndryl will be doing. And the benefit for credit unions and financial institutions is that we can focus on what matters, digital strategy.
Ah, perfect. Yeah. So again, going back to like what you said, what matters is that digital strategy going forward. And I like the use of the word utility. Yeah. So that goes into platformization and it fits into a lot of themes that we've been talking about. So if we were to assume that that goes well, and with positive intent and making all the right choices or all the good decisions get made, because again, it's a collective decision for credit unions now in Canada at this point. Uh, what do we see the future looking like? A good future, a bright future for the Canadian credit union system 10 years from now? And are there any lessons to be learned in order to get there that other financial leaders could follow?
I think from my perspective, in 10 years, what we need to get to where we need to be is an efficient platform that conveys network effect to the credit unions participating. When we talk about embedded finance, it's bidirectional. Like credit unions certainly want to embed themselves into processes that their members may be involved in, but also we want to take best of breed in terms of the fintechs out there and incorporate them into our offerings. A platform allows us to bring everything together and aggregate value. And looking out 10 years, I've said previously, the most important person in the room right now is the digital anthropologist. We need to use digital to define the digital future for credit union members and parlay the credit union value proposition into the future. If we do that with the right technology and focus on what we should be focusing on, digital strategy, and the underlying purpose of what it means to be a credit union, I see the next 10 years as being very prosperous for credit unions, not only in Canada, but North America and internationally.
Yeah, it's value aggregation, adopting that strong support role in those key moments for everyone in and as much as they need the credit union to be a part of their life. And there are a lot of touch points or a lot of moments we've gone over today that where we can make that a possibility. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Well, so now we reach one of my favorite parts of any of our talks, and that's the book recommendation section. So I would love, it's great to have someone of your profile, and I would love to know some of the books that you recommend people could look to. And if anything, when we go through the list, if you could recommend maybe one book or two books and the impact that it had on you, maybe at the time you were reading it, maybe you've gone back and read them a couple times, they've had a different effect. We're definitely curious to pick our thought leaders' brains on what books have an influence on them.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Wesley. Recently, I've been reading a lot on credit union history in Canada, and I have quite a few books on credit union history in Canada. But it's interesting; all of the books are sort of written either by institution or within individual provinces. I have two here that I can provide as an example. By Their Bootstraps: A History of the Credit Union Movement in Saskatchewan, and People in Progress. This is the history of credit unions in Manitoba. And even though they're written by province, what strikes me is really the ambitions and motives of the people founding credit unions across the country were all the same, but they were regional. And the reason why I'm combing through these books right now is because we're at a juncture where we need to take that same purpose and apply that nationally. So increase. We're no longer doing everything local. We rely on global. And so we need to be looking at things differently. So taking the ambitions of everybody, in the decades before us, and rolling into the future by thinking broader, by thinking about what we're going to do in Canada as a country.
That's interesting. You're talking about this concept of ambition sprouting up regionally across parts of Canada, but you're saying to kind of repurpose that ambition on a broader scale. You're talking about scaling ambition, basically, revisiting the same spirit.
Exactly. And, credit unions are local and will always be local. But the difference now is we're relying on international tools. So I have a quote from Merle Clement's book, By Their Bootstraps. Though the setting is Saskatchewan, the implications are national and international. Though the experiment was shaped by local conditions and local history, the credit union is the same tool in the hands of people anywhere, and the problem of mastering money is universal. So it speaks to, credit unions are applicable around the world. We are sort of dealing with generally local markets, but by using international tools, we can sort of take what was thought about in 1965 and make that relevant in 2021.
This is from the book from Manitoba. This is
from Saskatchewan.
Oh, this is from the Saskatchewan history. Wow, that's great. We'll definitely follow through and get the author there. I think that's a very powerful quote to say, mastering money is universal. I think that's very true.
And then another quote from this book in Saskatchewan. Alan Turner, the provincial archivist of Saskatchewan in 1965, wrote, "A jubilee is properly a time for celebration, but is more than that. It is a time to honor the pioneer and the builder and to record their accomplishments. It is a time, too, to look at the future, confident that with an assessment of past experience, a redirection to those principles which were applied, that were and proved to be of value, and a willingness to adopt to new situations, we can move forward to greater achievements." So again, it's taking what's worked for us in the past, thinking about the future pragmatically, and adapting to it. Credit unions have always been innovative. Credit unions have always been flexible. What we need to do today is look at the future and position ourselves so we can be successful as possible.
That line of thinking follows a pattern, a kind of wave that goes through it. It follows that same pattern of the analog versus digital that we talked about before, about saying, don't change for change's sake. Look at it, analyze it, see what works, be pragmatic, and use the best. In this case, digital helps scale, but how does that replace the things that are analog and what changes? And that's very interesting. It fits that pattern.
Correct, yes. And sort of managing relationships using digital. We're not going to go for the sake of digital, but we're using digital to support member relationships and doing what's in the member's best interest at the right point in time, at the right place. And I have one more quote from the Manitoba book, People in Progress.
Wonderful. I'm loving these quotes. Keep going. Yeah, these are great.
By Don Slimman. He wrote, "History is a fleeting thing, something that is often forgotten. With the accelerating rat race of life, the massive advertising and publicity campaigns, and with business swallowing up business, that forgetfulness is understandable. In my opinion, this can be fatal in a number of ways. The degree that we can begin to get off course as we come up with new ideas is infinite. It can land us far off the target that we had hoped to reach. And that's why having these conversations nationally is so important right now. I agree, it's easy to get off target if we're not thinking cohesively together. But if we do have broader conversations and we are open about where we need to be and we plan together, we can get to where we need to be in 10 years.
So you're saying that the mechanism of conversation, in as much as there's truth to it and people are being honest and transparent, acting as a tool for course correction towards landing where people want to go. Because like the quote is saying, you can land far off target if people are not aligned. And I think that's true in organizations, and that can be true at a regional level. It can be true at a national level. That sounds true to me.
Correct. Yes. Agility and openness. That's what it's all about.
Great. And is there any books now that are circulating, say these days, that someone might be able to get access to if we wanted to pick your brain a little bit further about what's going on in your mind in terms of modern reading?
I guess it's ironic. I guess the modern books with respect to the credit union system, there aren't many out there right now. There's a lot of books on the history going back decades, but nothing about today or looking forward. And what I take from that is the book on credit union history for now is being written now, and it will be affected by the decisions that we make. If we make good decisions and we position in the best possible manner, 10 years from now, the book on credit union history for the beginning of this century is going to be very, very positive, and it's going to be a good story for credit union members.
Well, Chris, this has been absolutely tremendous. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you for anything else you'd like to say. Any last words of wisdom you could share on our audience before we sign out here?
I guess I spent a lot of time thinking about glocalization, sustainable, local, using international. And I think sometimes when we think international, we think it's outside of our control, but the world is a small place. I was having a conversation with a financial services provider based in Iceland, Maniga, and I found out during the course of the conversation that their chief solutions architect, Christoph Einerson, is genetically related to me. And I don't have a conversation. Again, it just points back to the fact that the world is small. We are connected. That is going to be our reality moving forward. And by staying connected, we can all prosper in our localities.
Chris Goodman, everyone. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Wesley. I appreciate the opportunity.